Hi, and welcome to another in our education series. Today is all about leveraging equity. The reason you would be curious about leveraging equity would be to get your money or equity to work harder for you. The most common application of doing this would be to leverage equity to enable you to buy an investment property. There are other things you can leverage equity to do, but as the investment property is the most common example or common use, that's the example or scenario that I'll go through today. So here's the working example, and I'm going to use numbers here. I guess to make it relevant to you, you might want to substitute my numbers with your own. So this example has an $800,000 home, and provided you've got the serviceability, the bank would enable you to leverage 80% of the value of your property. Now, if you've already got a mortgage, if there's a pre-existing mortgage on the property, in this case $300,000, so 80% of your 800 is 640, minus the 300 mortgage against it gives you $340,000 of available equity to use. Now, if you were to go out and buy a $600,000 investment property, then again, the bank would allow 80% of that property to be secured against its own value. So that means you need to put in 20% from elsewhere if you want to avoid mortgage insurance. So a 20% equity contribution on the property is $120,000. Now, there are going to be additional costs, stamp duty, legals, etc. when you buy a property, and we're just using round, easy figures for this example of $40,000. So you're going to have to, the equity that you require would be the 20%, the 20% equity contribution, as well as the costs. So 20% of 120 plus 40 is 160, is your required equity for this $600,000 property. And you'll notice there that the 600 changed to 640 because it really is worth 640 if it's got 40,000 of costs in there as well. So remember, you had $340,000 of available equity to start with, and you've just used 160 of it. So you've still got 180 remaining. So, and that 180 that's there, you're certainly not paying interest on that. That's just sitting there as redraw or an equity access loan. It's not because you haven't drawn down on that. It's just sitting there. So the way, therefore, that this would be funded is it's almost like you've got one loan that's split into two parts. One loan of 640 to buy the property because it was 600 plus costs, and that 640 loan is split into the equity access loan, which is secured against your owner-occupied property, presumably, and the investment loan, which is secured against the investment property. But even though the equity access loan is secured against your own property, the interest paid on that full 640, broken down into two parts, is all attributable to your investment property. So it's all tax effective. So the big question is, and the reason why people would leverage equity, as I said at the outset, is to get your money working harder for you, or get your equity working harder for you. So if you've got current available equity in your home, it'd typically be earning, well, it's making nothing. Or if you've got money sitting in a term deposit, that money might be making 3% a year. But if that equity is leveraged and utilised for a property, like a good growth investment property, it could be earning 15% per annum or more. Let me show you how. So let's say, and for the last 150 plus years since they've been keeping records in Australia, property has doubled in value comfortably every 10 years. And if you've owned a property yourself, like a house on a block of land in suburban wherever, you could probably testify to that from your own experience. If you've owned a property for more than 10 years, there's a very good chance that it's comfortably doubled in value. So, but let's just be conservative moving forward, and let's say that moving forward it might take 15 years, not 10 years, but 15 for your $600,000 property to double in value and be worth 1.2. So if it's grown by $600,000 over 15 years, 600 divided by 15 is 40. So it's growing at $40,000 a year on average over that time frame. And let's say for this initial example that it's costing you $10,000 a year. The rent doesn't cover all the interest and expenses, and it's costing $10,000 a year to support. That means the annual profit is $30,000 a year. Now, remember that you used $160,000 of your own equity to buy this property. So if it's making $30,000 on average every year, and you've used $160,000 of equity, 30 over 160 is 18%. So in this case, your equity is now generating or earning 18% per annum. And if you don't understand compound growth works, what did Einstein say? It's the eighth wonder of the world. Basically, if your property is growing at 5% per year, the first year it's getting 5% growth on 600 to make it 630, but the next year it's getting 5% growth on the new value of 630. So you can see that each year it's making a little bit more growth, and that's how you get the average of 40 over the journey, which averages out at 18% per annum. So again, if your equity is sitting in your own place making zero at the moment because you haven't leveraged it, and it could be making 18%, then that's something you should seriously give some consideration to. Now, in that example that I've just used, we suggested that the property was going to be, remember, it was going to cost $10,000 a year because the rent didn't cover interest and expenses, and the shortfall was $10,000 a year. Well, that was just a round figure used for the example. The reality is there's quite a lot of flexibility, and there's there's a number of different things that we can do by varying the price point and location, which will vary the amount of cash flow that your investment property is costing you. So I've just included this example, which shows an investment property. You haven't bought it for $600,000. You've bought it for under $300,000, $290,000 in this case, and you see it's purchased for $290,000. It's renting for $300 a week. So this example here, rental income of $15,000 a year, expenses of $18,000. So it's losing $3,000 a year. Then you get a little negative gearing tax credit of $1,000 a year. So this example, this property is costing $2,000 a year, which is $40 a week. So that's a very different scenario. So if we plugged something like that, here we've got a property costing $3,000 a year into that previous example. So now we've got that same property that's making $40,000 a year, but instead of costing $10,000, it's costing $3,000 a year to support. Now it's making more annual profit, and therefore the return on equity figure has gone up. So there's all different things. We don't have to be using a $600,000 property, and it doesn't have to be costing $10,000 a year. There's all different price points of property types. There's all different variants on how much impact it's going to have on our weekly cash flow. But one of the most important things that you need to be considering when you're buying, leveraging equity and investing that equity into an investment property is that you're buying a great property in a great location that's going to deliver the growth. All very important. So, and those topics all warrant their own explanation, or how do you make sure you are buying a good property and in a good location that's going to deliver that growth that you need to get your equity working hard for you. We've got some educational videos just on those topics, and I massively encourage you to watch those, because leveraging equity is only like the first part of the overall education process, and it's very important, but just as or even more important is to make sure that you invest that equity into something that's going to work for you. It's really important that you don't overpay for a property, that you buy it in a good location with good demand, which will drive future growth. And if you want to understand how you achieve all of those without taking risks, the education costs you nothing. So I would massively encourage you to invest some of your time into that further education, and watch the next videos in the series. Thanks for joining us today, and look forward to connecting with you soon.